one lady said, I'm of a lower caste. I went to a party, Diwali party. I took a non-vegetarian dish. Nobody touched my dish.
That is violence.
That is violence. Another case, somebody said, oh, I have a child and we had play dates, and suddenly the other party did not bring their children to play with us. And it's a caste discrimination.
And this is all perceived caste
As part of this caste games that Equality Labs plays, they go after our festivals. They say Holi is casteist because burning Holika is Bahujan, whereas her brother, the king, is Brahmin or a Kshatriya. Publicly put out a statement saying, don't celebrate Diwali because during Diwali, Hindus decorate their houses, make sweets, and pray to casteist gods. Naturally,
gods are casteist.
gods. Naturally, that is discriminatory to Muslims and Dalits.
Oh, so celebrating festivals is discrimination.
Eating sweets is
Wow, discrimination against other groups.
When Equality Labs has publicly stated Hindus are Nazis.
Nazis.
We are Nazis. We fought the Nazis. We defeated Hitler, right? But we are Nazis.
Namaste. This is Sufiya Pathan for the Center for Scientific Social Studies. And today I have a special guest with me, Sudha Jagannathan. She's from CoHNA, which is a coalition of Hindus of North America. It's an advocacy and civil rights organization. And we're going to have a conversation about the kinds of issues that Sudha ji has been involved with. Sudha ji, if you could just begin by telling us briefly what kinds of issues CoHNA has been involved with.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. So, Coalition of Hindus of North America, I am a board member of that organization. And we have been working for about 5 years on multiple issues, particularly issues of civil rights that impact our community in North America. North America meaning Canada and the United States. And we work on issues that impact our right to religion and constitutional rights to freedom of speech, etc. So under that, we have a few campaigns. One is on Swastika, which is a different topic altogether. Then the second one is a big one, very complex, and it has to do with caste. The idea and ideology of caste being brought to the United States as uniquely identified only with one immigrant community, which is the Hindu American. So we really fight back on it, not because we want to practice caste discrimination, no, but we do not want the government bodies taking action to legalize caste in a way that targets the Hindu Americans singly as one group that is particularly prone to this. And then along with that, we are seeing a rise in hostility against our community. We kind of call it Hinduphobia, and we are really trying to get institutional recognition of that term. Only with that recognition can we then get support from law enforcement or lawmaking bodies to counter these kinds of issues.
So CoHNA is obviously seeing a need
Yes.
for doing this kind of work. And for today, I want to focus on the work related to caste. So now, in the US, you are seeing different kinds of policies and laws coming up on caste. Can you introduce the audience to what laws are being implemented or being framed?
Yeah.
And why they're important?
Yeah. I mean, there are two aspects to it. I'll just touch upon where this started. Started in academic environments, in universities that started to look at caste and add it to their human resources policies. In United States, there are several categories that are protected by law, which has to do with gender, race, color of your skin, national origin, ancestry, etc. But universities, in the last several years, we found that they were starting to add caste as a protected category. Pretty soon, from there, we found that in 2023, February, the city of Seattle passed an ordinance that only impacts the Seattle city, which is the city within the state of Washington on the West Coast. But the city passed an ordinance making caste a protected category and assigning monies to monitor such behaviors and incidents within the state. And then that was in February, and then March we saw the most progressive state in the United States, California, introduce a bill calling SB 403. SB stands for Senate bill because it was introduced by a freshman senator, Aisha Wahab. Very simple bill, but overnight it changed.
Uh-huh.
The bill was called Banning Caste Discrimination. The first version of it was very shocking to us. It was all about Hindu scriptures. Rig Veda says all of this. It's an immutable part of the Hindu identity. They made up all sorts of things, and the most dangerous was it was not about actual caste. It was about perceived caste. So looking at you, I can say, oh, Sufiya ji, I perceive you to be of some caste and behaving in a certain way, which, human behaviors express in different ways, but this made it extremely dangerous. So obviously we protested, and so by the time it passed the Senate, even against all our objections and meeting with all these senators, and then it went to the assembly where it took longer, and we did have support from the Asian American assembly members who stood with us, but it also passed the assembly, right? And the caste activists or the anti-caste activists, that's what they call themselves. I call them caste police. They want to police a community, and they were sitting pretty, right, very happy about where things were. Then it went to the governor's office to, he has to sign to make law. He sat on it for a month, and then he vetoed it. Basically, he said, we don't need a law like this. There are protections in our legal system that allow our prosecutors to handle any caste case without this becoming a piece of the law. And the protective categories are ancestry and national origin. And the same was also publicly spoken by several public prosecutors or DAs, district attorneys, who said, I don't need this law. I can prosecute any number of caste cases in my county without this becoming law because I have the right tools. So the bill failed. Right? Of course, we are extremely relieved and thrilled because the bill had only one intent: to profile one community. Right? It didn't have any civil rights or social justice benefits because the co-sponsor, Equality Labs, said this is a civil rights issue. But it really turned out to be a civil rights violation of us, right? And so that is why we fought against the bill, and we are happy that the bill has been vetoed. But they do have 2 more times that they can bring it into California legislature. They can try again and again. And they are determined to try. Right. So we are also vigilant.
So Sudhaji, you mentioned about real or perceived discrimination. Can you build a little bit on the features of this law and what you're looking at?
See, that was the danger of this law. It was so broadly and broadly written, and there's no definition of caste anywhere in the world. So it is based on the sponsor or whoever decides to make a law to say this is caste discrimination, right? So the real caste discrimination we saw, and was the basis, one of the pillars on which the bill was built on, was the Cisco Systems caste discrimination lawsuit brought by the California Civil Rights Department on 2 engineers within Cisco who had a startup within Cisco. That happens. Sundaraya and Ramana Kompella were accused of caste discrimination against a fellow employee who Sundaraya had hired, knowing that the guy was a Dalit, and the 2 of them had been classmates at IIT Mumbai and had worked on many startups and successfully done so. For whatever reason, this longtime friend decided to stab Sundar Iyer in the back. So in that particular case, the burden was really on Sundar Iyer to prove that he had not behaved in ways that could fall into caste
So
discrimination.
burden of proof is on the accused.
On the accused, which is not how it is usually. So even without the case going to court, all over the world, this news became the
Yes.
news on caste.
Right.
So much so that the defendant, Sundarayan Ramana Kompalla, had to leave the country for a little bit
My
for
goodness.
peace of mind, right? Because everybody assumed, Sundar Iyer, the name, Ramana Kompella, there must be some fire if there is smoke. So in that particular case, the state of California, their civil rights department filed a lawsuit. And the way they did it was they said, Sundar Iyer, his name is Brahman, and that means he was born with a caste. Caste is integral to the identity of Hindu. The state of California is saying all of this. All of this is unconstitutional. So first of all, I want to say the laws in India and the laws in the United States are different. Both are democracies, but both protect the rights of citizens in different ways. Okay, so the religious freedom right in the United States says that every individual in the US can practice their religion freely, and a state cannot define a religion. State cannot assign a religion to an individual. In this particular case in California, the Civil Rights Department, or the CRD, did all of that. Assigned a religion to Sundar Iyer, who is a publicly acknowledged atheist, or he is a non-irreligious. That's what he calls himself. He has written papers on it. He has been known to have no religion. But when he even pronounced that to the California Civil Rights Department, they said, we don't care. You are born as a Hindu has a caste, so you are a casteist. So that is a real case of a caste discrimination defined by the state by breaking the laws on how you deal with religion. A perceived caste can take different forms. One is that the Harvard Graduate Student Union passed adding caste as a protected category to their policies. Shortly after that, they said, we already heard from many students that professors, they are mostly Indian Hindu professors, were spending more time with upper caste students than with lower caste. Funny thing was,
this is during COVID.
During COVID, everything is on Zoom. How do you even know whether a professor spend any kind of time with anybody? And even if they spend, it might be a professional discussion of whatever is going on.
Or maybe it's a weaker student. The teacher spends more time with a weaker student.
Exactly. Instead of that, the Harvard Graduate Student Union said, wow, we got a caste discrimination. So that's a perceived or a made up situation. In another case, one of the cases in the equality labs, they have a survey. They did a survey in 2018, which they claimed proved there is caste discrimination in the United States. But that survey was online. Anyone, supposedly they were looking for candidates to do the survey in California, but it became a global. Anyone around the globe could fill in this form. And friends, you could then forward it to your friends. It's not random sampling, not scientific, just a survey, right? They took the survey, they purposely dropped certain survey results because it didn't match what they were looking for. They didn't either identify their caste or it wasn't the caste they were looking for. So it was all manipulated data. Based on that, they also had created a report saying, here are all of our instances, real caste violence. And what is it? One lady said, I'm of a lower caste. I went to a party, Diwali party. I took a non-vegetarian dish. Nobody touched my dish.
That is violence.
That is violence. Another case, somebody said, I have a child and we had play dates, and suddenly the other party did not bring their children to play with us, and it's a caste discrimination. discrimination.
And this is all perceived,
Perceived.
caste discrimination.
Somebody's mind is thinking, because maybe.
And this is under the law, it would be constituted as caste discrimination.
It have brought up. They have made allegations of all sorts of things, murders, many murders in the US, many all sorts of personal violations.
And is this recorded in the police records?
No,
that
not
this
a single police report, not a single human resources report in a company. No, and in the universities that pass this as a protected category, never did they have an instance before and have not had any record of caste discrimination after. These universities are usually publicly funded. So anyone like you or me can go pull down their discrimination reports,
Right.
and it will show discriminations by gender, by
Right.
race, by color, all sorts of
Right.
things. Not a single case of caste discrimination. So it's a house of cards, very nasty, dangerous house of cards, brought and stitched together by a group of people that really are intent on multiple reasons, and we'll go into that in the next few questions. But it's really meant to malign a community,
Right.
because there is, like I said, no police reports, no nothing. If there was really a violence, everybody has a freedom to go open a
Right.
report.
Right.
And if you're working for a company, we have mandatory training on discrimination and particularly sexual violence. You can call it in anonymously. You can make your reports to the human resources group. They will take action.
Right.
Nothing like that has happened.
Right.
And so this is a problem. The other thing is that who defines who is who? And I think that's something we should be actually discussing.
Right.
But the perceived and the real are categories defined by equality labs, the headquarters of caste knowledge and authority
Right.
that decide
Right.
what is what. So if something
so
happens,
for example, I was thinking, a teacher who is spending time with multiple students, how does she or he even know who is an upper caste student or a lower caste
nobody
student?
knows. Nobody knows.
I don't,
Yeah.
as a teacher in India.
Yeah. We don't. We are not focused on that. We're
So
just
who
looking.
decides? It's Equality Labs provides the expertise to decide who
Yes.
belongs to what caste.
Yeah. And this is part of a victimhood society that we are seeing around the globe that defines the world as just oppressed and oppressor. And who is the oppressor? In this case, it's the Hindu Americans or Hindu Canadians who are defined as oppressors. And it's on us to say, we are not oppressors. If we are oppressors, show us the data.
Right.
And California state legislators told us, we don't need data. We don't need any proof. And I said, do you mean that you can make bad laws every day without all this? Yes, we can. You don't like it? Go to court.
Wow.
This is what California state told me. I have to tell you, believing in democracy, it shook me to my core to hear a lawmaking body like California. And why was it dangerous for California to be leading this? It is because California is the 6th largest economy in the world.
Right.
It has become, from a conservative society, it's become the most progressive society, I would say, in all of North America.
Right.
And they're looked upon as a model to follow. So if they passed this and made it into law, we would have seen a wave of caste laws happening across North America, then across the ocean, crossing the Atlantic, and then into Europe, everywhere. We would have seen a wave of action making caste a criminal offense, and without addressing or removing the root of caste tied to Hinduism.
Right. And you mentioned, for instance, that the Cisco case and Sundar Iyer. And finally, the case is still ongoing against Cisco, but they dropped the case against Sundar Iyer and
Ramana.
But on what grounds, if you could
elucidate? Yeah.
So
so the case was filed against Sundar and Ramana in 2020. For 4.5 years, the California Civil Rights Department could find no evidence of any wrongdoing by these two. So finally, Sundar and Ramana and their legal team went to California Civil Rights Department and said, we are going to file a motion in court to sanction you, because this is harassment, bullying. You have not been able to prove anything against us. Well, the CRD caved in because they knew they had nothing to go with, right? So they pulled back, withdrew voluntarily the case against Sundar Ayyan and Romana, and they can never bring it back against the two.
Right.
But they are holding Cisco on.
Right. But these are powerful individuals who can manage the resources and the time and the energy and the legal expertise to
Yes.
counter clearly a state organization that is taking a damaging stand against
The two of them,
a section of the population.
And Sundaraya has spoken about it in many situations. And he said that first of all, you are right. They had the financial wherewithal to do it. Not everybody is going to do that. We particularly feel that if another Hindu manager is accused of it, and let's say that person is on temporary visa in the US, like the H-1B, what does that person do? Probably kill himself or herself, right?
Yeah.
Because there is no way he or she is going to be able to prove this didn't happen.
Right.
And how is a manager to do his or her job well, knowing in the back of his mind, right? So one thing I want to say is that this was a big deal. A lot of people came to know about it because organizations like us started to educate people and say, you need to pay attention. They did not know this was going on. And sometimes they would say, why are we fighting this? Shouldn't we just agree to stop caste discrimination?
Right.
Isn't that a good thing?
Right.
If I'm not practicing caste, why does it affect us?
Right.
Well, that is a very important question, because while you think that you are not practicing caste, etc., this law, if made into law, would have blanket maligning, blanket branding of our entire community as castes,
Right.
whether you practice or not, and in perpetuity, meaning the second, third, whatever generations are coming are always going to be called castes. Yeah. Now, just a historical reference: in 1871, the British Criminal Act, Criminal Tribal Act, did the same. They said these nomads that are going around India and tribals are criminals.
Tribes.
It really made them criminal because the government at that time, the British, made it punishable for anyone to help them, right? So in this particular case, it would be exactly same colonial version of a law in a country that prides itself on standing for the individual, democratic values, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, going out of its way to malign and target one community as oppressive, more prone to violence than anyone else, when they have no data to say that. Because every criminal index around the country or around the world shows that the Hindus are the least, problematic people. We go anywhere, we put our heads down, work hard, take care of our families, and live our normal lives. We are not really standing up for anything, honestly.
Right.
We don't show up and say, okay, we want these rights. We don't do that. It's not a part of our DNA.
Yeah.
So to say that we are more prone than anyone else and genetically prone to practice caste is a very big violence on the community.
Right.
So, yeah, so that's why we fight back.
Just to summarize what you're saying, SB 403 is one law that was proposed in one state. The state or senators from the state can choose to bring it up 2 more times. So it's not gone yet. You're not out of the woods. At the same time, other states can begin to start creating laws on the basis of this model, which is available. You already have a city, Seattle, which has an ordinance which has added caste into its protected categories. All of this is on the basis of zero data of any kind of problems of caste discrimination from either police or other agencies. The laws will protect against real and perceived discrimination. Where perceived discrimination, it's next to impossible for the accused to even begin to to justify whether he or she discriminated or not.
Right.
So it will be that the accused is
Trapped anyway.
is guilty
Is guilty.
just because they are of some identity, an identity which the accused himself or herself is not aware of,
Yes.
because they may not be aware that they are considered upper caste or not.
Right.
We have no clue.
Yeah.
Because we're not just talking about first generation Americans, we're talking about second and third generation Americans. Besides that, even first generation Americans will have confusion
Yes.
in terms of how to understand their caste,
Yes.
which is true even in the Indian context.
Yes.
So there's all of that. Add to that, the structure of the law makes it the burden of proof rests on the accused, besides criminalizing, predetermined criminalization of an entire section.
Yes.
And this is a law that is still very much out there in the US.
Yeah.
And just so the audience understands the implications, this is not an isolated law. So caste has been discussed in the UK. In fact, even though they succeeded in not allowing them to add caste in their equality legislation, they have a very successful caste legislation, a case that went through. So case law is in their favor, and we'll talk about that. And even in the European Parliament, there have been discussions about caste legislation.
Yeah.
So this is by far no longer an Indian problem, right? We're talking about international caste legislation.
Yeah.
I just want to go into, when we talk about claims about discrimination, you said that the Equality Labs plays a role in having a survey. What kind of role did that survey play? What kind of findings did the survey have?
So the survey itself, I mentioned that it was a online survey, unscientific, and they also say that it has not been scientifically verified. But they have successfully used that survey to get to these places of power.
Right.
You know, in the halls of lawmaking, the government entities, the universities. Even today, there are their buddies will go train lawyers on caste, which means if there is a case and if a person is accused of caste discrimination, you can't find good lawyers who would trust you, because a lawyer is already trained by Equality Labs kind of people. And so their survey also was refuted by a very reputed organizations like the Carnegie Endowment Survey, which came out with a survey of Indian Americans in 2021 and made a specific reference to Equality Lab survey, saying it's not scientific and that data should not be used in situations. Not only that, in the Cisco lawsuit by the state of California, Equality Labs presented its survey and its report as proof. And the judge in that case, like in 2022, I think February, threw it out. He said this has no relevance in this case, and it's inadmissible. That's basically. So everywhere, when it gets to a point where real authoritative people look at it, say this has no relevance, right? But they don't give up. This is their Bible, honestly. This is what they go with, right? And they have taken it into all sorts of places. The EU, probably the World Bank. The Equality Labs has gotten into World Bank because they wanted to influence how World Bank gives money and loans to countries. You know, there is this concept of ESG, environmental, social, and governance metrics that everybody tries to adhere to. They want to add caste. You know, as a category. Is this country practicing this kind of discrimination? Then you shouldn't give them a loan. So they are actually crossing the boundaries of governance, really. You know, by
so you have a non-governmental organization acting like quasi-state advisory body.
Yes. Yeah, and they're not even a non-profit. Usually NGOs are non-profit. They are for-profit. They are funded by many organizations, questionable organizations that fund other questionable entities. This has been tracked.
So it's a commercial organization.
Yeah.
making money
Mhm.
out of whatever activities like DEI trainings,
Yes,
etc.,
yes, yes.
talking about caste,
Right.
and yet they present themselves as a non-op or a sort of civil rights organization.
Yes, yes. That's what they present. So it is a very strange kind of a what is it, positioning they have taken, but it works,
Right.
right? Otherwise, why would California state say, yeah, we're going to pass a law,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So they do have a lot of relevance there, and they also, when you say how do they define all of this stuff, they have developed a tool.
I see.
In their
They
report,
define caste through a tool.
no, they define how can you determine the caste of somebody. Okay, they have a tool. It's in their caste report, publicly available. Everybody can go download that report. It tells you, here's our toolkit to determine the caste of any person.
Right.
And it says by the last name, by the city or town or village they originate from, and hey, are they vegetarian? If they're vegetarian, upper caste, no doubt, right? And skin color. If you are darker skin color, you are low caste. Fairer skins, definitely, Sufiya, you are in trouble. Okay, and so they have all these markers, and so what does it say really to have all of this ready to go? It says they are the ultimate place to go to. We asked Santa Clara County Human Rights Commission when they were debating this. We said, who will assign us our caste badge? Are you going to do it? Do I go to San Francisco or state of California? No answers, right? I mean, so you understand how complex the situation is, how much effort and money and structure India has put into managing all of this.
Right.
There's nothing of that sort in the US. That is where Equality Labs feels they can play.
So it's an opportunity. For
Opportunity.
organizations like Equality Labs.
Oh, yeah.
They can make money through trainings. They act as experts
Mhm.
to guide state policies.
Yes.
And not just guide state policies, but they become the experts in every case that would come up.
Yes.
Because they are the ones who will say who is upper caste and who is lower caste.
Yeah.
And I mean, for somebody in India, it's very obvious the difficulties that lie in establishing caste. For instance, somebody who is SC in one state is not SC in another state. So we rely on a very fine-grained set of administrative bodies who assign these roles. And this is for the entire population. But for the US, do they even realize that they are going into territory where they would have to establish neutral administrative bodies of huge scales to be able to profile their Indian population? And even on what basis is not clear.
I don't think they plan to do any of that.
So it's Equality Labs.
Equality Labs. And profiling a community that's only 1% or 1.5% of the entire population.
Right.
You know, population of the US is about 330 or 340 million people.
Right.
And the Hindu Americans are only about 3.5 million. Have more than, I mean, large segment of them are not even green card holders or citizens. They are on H-1B or student visa, or so they are in a visa, temporary visa limbo. They're not going to go ahead and do things around here. So to monitor a population that's 1%, that have a proven record of being law-abiding and never having committed any of this kind of rampant discriminatory issues, the state is now expending money. So the point about Equality Labs making money, the diversity, equity, and inclusion became a big thing in the last 20-25 years.
Right.
In corporations, in universities, I would say in all those institutions around the world, even in US, I mean in India, I'm sure DEI is all of a sudden popped up. Even though we are the most diverse land on earth, and
we still have to be schooled in diversity.
Schooled in diversity.
Yeah.
So they have lots of money, given to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in organizations. So let's say 80-90 billion dollars, right? And that's a piece of cake that Equality wants a big chunk of. That's why they are non-profit. They're not a non-profit. They are for-profit. Wow. So they are invited to come in and give talks at these big companies. Right. And the one company that said, we don't need this, we don't need you, was Google. when Thenmari Soundarajan came in to give a talk, the employees at Google said, "This is not right. We don't agree. We are extremely upset." And the Google CEO said, we don't need trouble.
Right.
Okay, we don't need this kind of thing. So then they turned around and accused Sundar Pichai that he should resign because he's an upper caste.
Wow.
Right? So this is how they play the game. And the HR person who invited Thenmari announced her resignation. Thenmari Soundarajan is the head of Equality Labs. And the person at Google who invited Thenmari Soundarajan to give a talk, she is a Jain Hindu, she says. But she announced her resignation in an article on Washington Post journal, you know.
Right.
I mean, so imagine, I want to tell my story to Washington Post, they don't give me a time of day.
Absolutely.
But this woman says, oh, I had to resign.
On moral
That
grounds.
is caste discrimination.
Right.
Huh? So this, again, anybody can throw anything at anyone, and it flies right now, which is the thing. So maybe we should talk a little bit about Equality Labs itself. Equality Labs started off, a couple of decades ago. They dabbled here and there, then got into the California textbook debate where the Hindu parents were saying the textbooks are completely wrong, it's bad information. They came in and said, no, don't remove caste, blah. So that is how they figured caste is a good way for them to gain some ascendancy, right, traction. And Thenmari Soundarajan has an interesting background. She claims her dad was a Dalit from Tamil Nadu or somewhere. Well, he was a physician. So what that tells us is that he was an extremely bright guy, went to medical school, got into US through merit, right? Because there is no visas that says Dalit or caste or what. So he came as an Indian immigrant, made a very successful career in Los Angeles. His wife was also working, and he had two daughters. One is Thenmari Soundarajan. So this is a woman who says, I stand against oppression, I am a Dalit, whatnot. But there is no Dalit designation or relevance in the United States. She was never oppressed. She grew up in a very affluent family. Her dad, she says, was a very successful doctor and would contribute money to temples. Mom was a Christian. She would follow her mom's religion. Happy life. And then she went to Berkeley, etc. So this is not the life of what you consider oppressed.
So basically what happens is that her father's Dalit background in the US, in India, becomes an opportunity for her.
Yes.
In the US. Because there's a public discourse about caste discrimination that is centuries old, that talks about oppressive systems.
Yes.
So even though she's Christian, even though she hasn't been in India, so she hasn't faced discrimination, she becomes a representative of oppressed groups.
Yes.
Right? And even though she's running a commercial organization.
Yes.
Right? So just to draw from that, it seems as if caste becomes the kind of identity or label which you can't get rid of. You may even not be aware of it, but you can't get rid of it, right? So one of the case I was talking about in the UK, for instance, is very interesting in this case. On the one hand, you have Soundarajan, for instance, claiming a Dalit label. On the other hand, in this case, in the UK, a couple was accused of, basically it was a case about labor. So they hired a woman from India, who the case described as a Bihari Adivasi woman, Christian, and they hired her to come and stay with them and take care of, as a domestic help. And what happened was that whether she filed or she got roped into filing a case was filed in the labor courts because she was underpaid as per labor laws in the UK. And the couple doesn't dispute that. But the problem is that they saw this as an opportunity to include in that case counts of religious and caste discrimination. So the couple who hired her had to pay damages not just for labor, but under active discrimination against religious and caste grounds.
Wow.
And the funny thing is, now they had to establish, for instance, did the couple know that she is lower caste? And in this case, the couple knew she was lower caste. Why? Because the lady was wearing a white sari with a red border. And apparently that is a caste marker. And everybody knows that an Adivasi woman from Bihar is lower caste or tribal if she's wearing this sari. Even the distinction between lower caste and tribe was simply not addressed in the case. And the cherry on the cake is the couple who was accused, both are Buddhists.
So if you look at the Equality Lab's website, they say they stand with Muslims, Sikhs, Dalits, and Adivasis. They don't stand with Hindus at all. And Dalits are not Hindus, according to them. So the interesting thing is, what do they mean by the word Dalit and Adivasi when they are an organization in North America? Because the terms don't apply in the US. Who's the Adivasi in the US? It's the Native Americans. Well, she's not fighting for their rights. Who's the Dalit in North America? Dalits in North America, just like any other Hindu American, came with merit, succeeded. They are millionaires. The guy who made a case against Sundarayar is a millionaire by working with Sundar on many startups, and Sundarayar giving him extra stock options, is a millionaire. So that calls out the fallacy of their civil rights question, because they do not stand for oppression, they do not stand for poor people without a voice, they stand for the rights of people who are rich and can be painted as victims.
Right. So, Sudhaji, what would you say to people who would raise the question that these are, after all, just safeguards, protections? Maybe somebody in the future requires them, even if there's no data so far. Why would you oppose that?
Mm-hmm. Well, we already see the harm of all of this narrative, particularly in the second, third generation, right?
Mm-hmm.
They go to universities, we raise them as good kids,
Yeah.
appreciate the whole world, everybody is a friend. They go to university and Equality Labs is there giving them training.
Right.
And the training says, go challenge your parents, ask them their caste. If they don't tell you, walk out of your home.
Walk out of your home.
Don't have any relationship
because
with your
they won't
family.
tell you their caste.
They won't tell your caste, or they might lie, or they don't know, or whatever it is.
So even if they don't know, they're basically hiding something.
Yeah,
that's
that's the implication. So it doesn't matter if you did not grow up seeing any discrimination or in America at all. You just walk away, cut off your parents.
So it literally threatens communities coming
together. So in the United States, the second generation, I want to say, California State University system, that is separate from University of California itself. California State University system has 23 campuses with a lot of Indian American students who go there because it's a little cheaper, high quality education. And 3 years ago, they added caste as a protected category. They had a public hearing. We all called in. There were more calls saying, don't do this. And the student union, which is where this all starts, said, no, we are adding it. Okay, they add. And like I said, no cases before, no cases after. And this is public information. We cannot pull anything from their websites. But there was a student in one of the CSU campuses who joined us when we talked to the administration at CSU about this particular issue. First of all, the administrators are clueless. They don't know what this caste thing is.
The administrators are basically Americans.
They have
no background in India.
They have no idea of caste, either except for what Equality Labs report and survey has told that they have this. And so when they have no idea, and the student speaks up, she didn't show her face because she didn't want to be, targeted. Her name was changed, and she said, when this was going on, I wrote a letter. My friends and I wrote an email to the administrators asking, why was this policy implemented? And instead of the school engaging with them, they got a legal letter from lawyers. These are 20-some year, 19-20-year-old students. You get a legal letter, it shuts you down right away, right? And then she tried to say, I decided not to celebrate Holi and Diwali that year because usually I do that with vegetarian party, and I decided it was not good idea because I'd be targeted. That is true. As part of this caste games that Equality Labs plays, they go after our festivals. They say Holi is casteist because burning Holika is Bahujan, whereas her brother, the king, is Brahmin or a Kshatriya. How is I mean, we have to laugh at it. But this is the group that's claiming to be authority on caste. So because we are pushed against it, they have sort of taken a little step back. But that same narrative is showing up in in India today. I'm seeing, posts about burning Holika is wrong because she's a Bahujan. She's not Bahujan. She was the daughter of a rishi and the sister of a king. So ignorance is they are ignorant people, but they celebrate their ignorance, right? And Diwali, because University of California Davis, which is another major campus where a lot of students go, they have a group called Other Collective. Thus, Other Collective is supposed to be a safe place for everyone who's been excluded from the various student groups. Other Collective. They publicly put out a statement saying, don't celebrate Diwali, because during Diwali, Hindus decorate their houses, make sweets, and pray to casteist gods. Naturally,
Gods are casteist.
Naturally, that is discriminatory to Muslims and Dalits.
Oh, so celebrating festivals is discrimination.
Eating sweets is
wow, discrimination against other groups.
Other Muslims and Sikhs.
I see.
And so, so the student
has there ever been a claim that Sikhs or Muslims celebrating their festivals is discriminatory to Hindus?
No. Right. So they're going after our festivals in big ways, in all sorts of ways, right? But
so just to say, what is the harm of having a protected category? That becomes the platform to attack Indians across the board who are labeled upper caste. No matter who they may be.
Everybody is upper caste. If they don't go and bow down before the Equality Labs, we are all upper caste. Right. So the student is now, we are seeing a situation of freedom of religion doesn't apply to that student. Right. She cannot practice her religious traditions and practices because giving a vegetarian feast is considered upper caste. And she said,
and this is anti-constitutional in the US.
It is. And she said, and the school didn't get it. They couldn't understand why she cannot give a party. I said, have you seen this handy dandy tool that says vegetarianism is upper caste? What tool? I haven't even read it, right? So the student also said, I'm born and raised in the US. I don't know what my caste is, and my fiance is from a different part, originally from a different part of India. He speaks a different language, and we are kind of thinking about, should we even live in California? Right. What would it be for us to live and marry and work and raise a family? What would happen to our next generation? Right. These are 20-some years old kids starting to think.
What is their future in the US if caste, which they don't understand at all, becomes the defining fact?
Defining fact. And Tenmari Soundarajan has written a book called The Trauma of Caste, which she handed out to every legislator in the California legislature. And they all read it and felt, oh, so sad. Because, like I said, she's an affluent Indian American, never was oppressed, and she claims that my skin color is dark, I was not allowed in playgrounds. So that is huge victimhood trauma, right? But kids who read that book, because she's good at spinning a story, they read the book, they come home and say, okay, dad and mom, how are you going to atone for the sins of your ancestors? And the parents just don't even know where to begin. Yeah, how do you address a question like that? Huh?
It's like, when did you stop beating your wife? You've already committed the sin. There's nothing you can even...
And if caste discrimination was practiced in their particular family, when was it? What is your record? And what happened there? Have you seen that happening in your household in the United States? So we need to have young people start to think in ways like, what is your lived experience? Have your parents treated anybody badly? Have you treated others badly? And would you stand up?
Likely have gone through, because it seems like the moral
right thing to do. Yeah. So students speaking up is very powerful. And we bring in students into our conversations with legislators, lawmakers. It gives them an experience also to how to engage in a civic society
Right.
and stand up for your own rights.
Right.
And I'm very proud of those young
Yeah.
kids.
So one level that you're talking about is the harm done in universities.
Mm.
What about, is there potential harm in, let's say, economic establishments?
Yeah. So let me explain. Like universities, we'll say universities have become the bastion of progressive thought.
Right.
And instead of teaching critical thinking in our children, the universities are now showing themselves to only show a biased position. The professors take the biased positions, the administration stands with the biased positions, and instead of representing and protecting all students, they will actually go out of their way to cause violence on one segment of students. We have seen that very much so.
Right.
And so this caste business really comes from academic work at Harvard and at UC Berkeley, Columbia, everywhere. You know, they produce data, and academic research is very important to prove whether something is really valid or not. I mean, today's world depends on academic research, and so that is where their work becomes very, very important in setting a narrative that causes harm. Because Rutgers Network Contagion Research Institute a couple of years ago showed that these kind of narratives builds up an online storm of activity. That online, you know, like the dark web is where all these actors play. They'll start coming up, bubbling up these ideas, and then once it gets to a certain pitch, it shows as violence on the streets. So we'll see temple attacks, we'll see attacks on people, we'll see a lot of really nasty stuff happening.
And when these attacks are happening, it's not as if those who are attacking they know whether this is upper caste or lower caste. They're just attacking Indians.
Yeah.
Because they think they're all castes.
Yes. Yeah. So it's an important, unfortunate role that universities are playing. And DEI was a big thing. So I want to say, right now, the US administration is taking a completely different view of DEI. They're saying we don't need DEI. Universities are shutting it down. So in the economic impact, the corporations, Microsoft, so these are the companies that we know have added caste as protected categories. One is Cisco Systems itself has added caste as a protected category to its human resources policies. Apple, Airbnb, Salesforce, Microsoft has invited these so-called equality labs and their cohorts for multiple presentations to their employee base. But same Microsoft will not give somebody like CoHNA or other Hindu organizations an opportunity to come in and give a different view, right? Because it doesn't fit the narrative of ESG and DEI. But they are dismantling all of this right now, which I'm very happy about. In one sense, I have to say I always stood for DEI because it's important to have diversity and inclusion, but not equity. Equity stands for equal outcomes. We want equality, which is equal opportunity. So, but the way it was implemented, it was all going to promote certain narratives. That is wrong. You know, that monies cannot be used to promote certain agenda based items. So that's why a complete dismantling of DEI is a good thing, and maybe they can learn some lessons, we hope, right, and come back to promote diversity and inclusion in different ways. The inclusion, one other example I'll give you is that a friend of mine was working for a major company on the East Coast, and one day he came to me and said, you know, we are in this mandatory training on discrimination, and the trainer is a third party hired by our company, and the third party during the discussion gave an example of discrimination, caste discrimination in India. This is a course in the US. And so he said he and 6 or 7 other Indians were felt humiliated, and they sitting with their heads down. And then he said, what should I do? I said, go to your HR, ask for a meeting. So he got a meeting with HR, who also invited this trainer. HR heard him out and said, I agree with you. Our training should be inclusive and not humiliating and excluding a segment of our population. And so she asked this trainer, we want you to remove that exam. She said, no, this is part of our curriculum and we will not remove it. I am the authority, or my company is the authority. And we came across this in other situations too. When they went to the company that produces the training, the company said, no, we will keep the caste discrimination in there because it is our training. So the danger in all of this, Sufiya ji, is that there are entities standing to now claim positions of authority on caste, on Hindu, on Indianness, and they dismiss anyone challenging them. They are the sole authority on this. But we know they are ignorant of the basics.
They're
of
ignorant and they're commercial, which
Commercial.
means that they're just going to look for opportunities.
Yeah. So if we do not fight back this kind of cabal, they get to be the voice for all of us. See, Hinduism doesn't have a pope or anyone standing at the and who is going to take on equality labs from, let's say, from a faith point of view? We don't have the structure. So the individual is fighting, and we are fighting to make sure we have the right to practice and live as whatever we want to be.
But also, I mean, just the kind of paraphernalia that they put into place, right?
Mm.
Oh, Indians require
Mm.
a certain kind of regulating.
Yes,
right?
yes.
So that will have implications for companies. wouldn't
Yes,
it?
exactly. So Microsoft or Cisco systems, having added this to their policy, actually puts an extra burden on their employees who are managers or software developers or whatever it is, to think twice about. Maybe a manager writes a appraisal for an employee. The employee can come back and say, this is bad. I got a bad review because I am lower caste. My manager is upper caste. What is that guy going to do? He doesn't have the money or the wherewithal of Sundaraya. I mean, so then what happens to companies? Companies will start looking at the resumes and say, Raj Kumar sounds like an Indian name, a Hindu name. I think I'll put this aside and I'll hire Anthony Ramos, right, or something, because it's going to cost me more money to hire this Hindu.
Because there are additional legal baggages that they're coming with.
I need to have a lawyer or a team who understands all this. I have to pay equality labs to tell me, is this true or not? And I just don't want to deal with this thing.
Right.
I'm going to hire somebody else.
Right.
And so what happens to the Indian going forward?
Mhm.
Indian going forward will have to change his name from Raj Kumar to Robert Thomas or something.
Mm.
Over time, what happens? It's a cultural genocide. Because an entire culture is going to change,
Relinquish
their identity. We see this already happening. Hindu students are so humiliated in schools. They are the most bullied on the basis of religion in the US. Then they say, why should I even be a Hindu? I don't want to be Hindu. I'm going to be an atheist. No religion for me. Easier.
And in fact, there's a study that documented the impact of these DEI trainings.
Yes.
Right. And
so that was a recent study by Rutgers Network Contagion Research Institute, along with another organization called Social Perceptions Lab. They did a study, a very comprehensive study, looking at the impact of diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI training on people who are getting trained. And the study was extremely eye-opening. They looked at three aspects of it. One was religion, the other one was race, and the third was caste. They picked up caste because it's gaining some traction in the US. I will only address the caste portion. So they divided the participants into two groups. One is control, one is experimental. The control group was given standard material to read on caste. The experimental group was given equality labs material to read. And then they gave a scenario and asked for their opinions. The scenario was Raj Kumar applied to an elite university. He was interviewed by Anand Prakash. Raj Kumar did not get admission. Very simple scenario, neutral scenario. The control group gave straightforward answers. Hey, lots of reasons why students don't get into universities. Nothing, particularly troubling in this particular situation. The ones who got equality labs material said Anand Prakash, the interviewer, is upper caste. Raj Kumar is lower caste. Anand Prakash exhibited microaggressions Anand Prakash has to be punished. He needs to be fired from his job. And they also did the survey by switching the names, where Anand Prakash applied for admission and Raj Kumar interviewed him. Didn't make any difference. The interviewer was perceived. This is a question of perceived. It's not even a real scenario. It is just a survey scenario. They said, no, the interviewer is upper caste, is oppressive, and showed oppression in the interview. No details were given of the interview itself, but the perception was that this person acted wrong, because now we have a victim who didn't get admission. If there is a victim, there is an oppressor. That's how they looked at it. And that same study went on to look at a little more further by taking Hitler's words against Jews during the lead up to Second World War and the Holocaust. And we know Hitler's narrative really caused the animosity towards Jews, and which ended up in 6 million Jews being exterminated. And so they took the same term, the statements of Hitler, they replaced Jews with Brahmins. Again, conducted a study. And the control group, which read neutral stuff, they said, okay, Brahmins, or whoever, it's okay. The other side was 1/3, 35% more people said Brahmins are parasites, Brahmins are virus, Brahmins are devil personified. These are the same
They
terms.
agreed with such statements.
They agreed with Hitler's words on Jews, because at that time Hitler said Jews are parasites and viruses and devil personified. Same thing. In this case, even though it said Brahmins, it really meant all Hindus. So it is a perceived caste, perceived ideas of a community that lead to this. And and even Equality Labs has publicly stated Hindus are Nazis. We are Nazis. We fought the Nazis. We defeated Hitler, right? But we are Nazis, according to her. So it's a highly dangerous narrative and actions going on in the US. I'm glad. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to talk about it in detail, because what we are saying is that you can transplant experiences. Let's forget India, South Asia, Southeast Asia, Middle East, all of these, and even in Europe. Europe has had caste, right? Don't bring those and impose it in the United States, because the situation, the scenarios are different. Laws are different. You can't pick on one community and say yes and this. And I'll tell you how the Hindu community was discriminated against when SB 403 was being debated in the Senate Judiciary Committee in California. There were two women, both of Hispanic background, meaning Spanish background, who came from Mexico, right? And the one lady said, I have seen this in Mexico, so this must be true here. When we talked to some of their staffers, and one staffer said, this happens in Mexico. So we said, if it happens in Mexico, have you behaved the same way in the US? No.
So why not have the same laws in the US profiling Mexicans?
I know. So when they don't apparently practice in the US what they practice or have seen in Mexico, but these two senators said, I have seen it in Mexico, so I'm sure the Hindus are behaving this way. One other thing also is there's a whole narrative about Indian Americans, how corrosive it is. I was invited to speak on this SB 403 in California in a county Democratic caucus that was debating whether to add on. Senator Aisha Wahab spoke, many others spoke. When it was my turn, they said, no, we don't need any more hearing. We are going to pass it. So the person who invited me was a city leader. He said, but you haven't heard from her. Oh, we don't need to. We know we are going to pass this. And before the mic was silenced, one of the guys said, the Hindus have had this coming for a long time. I'm glad this is happening. So Equality Labs narrative all
so
of
it's really
this
targeting a
targeting
section on some sort of perceived
ideas that we deserve
problem.
punishment.
Mhm.
This is what the Rutgers study says. Training by equality labs
Shows that you need
shows that you
punishment.
need punishment. Sundarayar needed to be punished.
So although it's proposed as a protection,
It's
actually
hunting down
creating
and
violence.
yeah.
And in some sense promoting violence.
Promoting violence.
Right.
So that is why equality labs and these organizations have to really be paid attention to. We don't want them to be the authority on
Right.
caste or Hinduism.
And one of the things you said was, I mean, India is a different context, the US is a different context, but even legally, these two countries, their legal framework is very different.
Mhm.
So whereas caste laws of a particular kind are okay, in the US, they don't have the same framework.
No.
So in fact, these laws are not facially neutral. They're anti-constitutional.
Yes. And facially neutral might confuse people, and that means everybody has a race. You and I have a race, we have color, we have gender, we have national origin, we have ancestry. Everybody has. But not everybody has caste. And so when you add that, it again says we are targeting a community within the larger population, which is wrong in the United States constitutional.
It's anti-constitutional.
Yes, it is.
So to just make sure I understand what you're saying, what is facial neutrality, right? In the US, for instance, as a contrast to the Indian case, in India, when we're talking about laws related, let's say, to domestic violence, they are laws that give access to women, not to men. But in the US, such a law would be unconstitutional. So the law has to be give equal opportunity, whether you're a woman or a man, to access that feature of the law.
Yes.
So what we take as norms in the Indian context are anti-constitutional in the US.
Yes.
So this caste legislation is anti-constitutional in the US, no matter what the norms in India may be. And I want to link that to the fact that, just so many of you have said that this is a responsibility for me to take up, and to let the audience know that you are actually from an OBC background. So could you tell the audience, why did you get involved in this kind of a situation?
Yeah. So we know that Equality Labs was claiming to be a Dalit and standing for all Dalit Bahujan. And people like me, and I'm part of an organization called Apna DB, which is Ambedkar Phule Network of North America, Dalit Bahujan. All of us stand together with the larger Indian community. We are all Hindus, right? And we said, we don't need equality labs. We don't need Tenmari Soundarajan to represent us. We can fight our own battles when that happens. Tenmari Soundarajan does not represent us and is not a voice for us. In fact, she is hostile to us and our interests. So we actually set up this organization, or some of our leaders set up this Apna DB to just give a counter to Equality Labs claiming to be the sole arbiter in all of these caste discussions. And I decided that many of my fellow board members and steering committee members are also Dalit and Bahujan. We now come out and stand up as Dalit Bahujan because it's important to call this out and claim our identities when others are co-opting or appropriating our identity.
And commercial organizations claiming to be representative organizations.
Yes. And Tenmari Soundarajan having said publicly that she was a Christian and Buddhist now, she doesn't represent any Hindus, and her website is very clear. She represents. So we have to represent and advocate for our own stance. So that is why I stand up and I talk about these things. I also lead a lot of the government actions, meaning outreach to government, lawmakers, policymakers, law enforcement, talk to them about who we are, why these things are wrong. So I started to do that along with a lot of the Hindu Americans who work with us. The SB 403 was the first time the Hindus came together, rallied in the capital of California, Sacramento. Until then, we were No, we
Just
were not visible.
individuals,
We
right?
were not visible. Now we have decided we have to be visible. We have to claim our identities,
Right.
not allow others to claim it incorrectly. And we have to set the narrative straight because why? Because our existence in the US as Hindus is at stake.
Right.
Our young people need help. They
Right.
need to have somebody standing behind them.
Yeah.
So I do that. And I'm very proud of standing up that way. Plus, a lot of the Indian Hindu Americans will not publicly come out. We don't know who's a Dalit, Bahujan, or anybody. Okay, first of all, we don't care.
Yeah.
But when you give voice to the people, it also gives them courage.
Right.
If they face something at work or somewhere, speak up.
Right.
Or reach out to the organization like us and say,
Right.
we need help.
Right.
And we have had a lot of situations in the US of misunderstandings of Indian culture and practices that cause parents to have their kids taken away.
Oh, wow.
Yes, I know. I mean, there was a movie Norway.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Similar to that, we have had issues in the US. So it is very important for us to stand up, speak out against these kinds of narratives, and set the narrative straight. So
Right.
one way we do is celebrate our festivals. Everybody is included. Another thing is speak out on these things. Set up student groups in the universities so they can take action.
Right.
And like I said, I feel like I'm have a little privilege of having a voice, can speak, right? And it's not a privilege of position.
Having a strong voice.
Having a strong voice. Yeah, but it is not privilege of caste or privilege of power. I don't have access to the power centers, that Equality Labs has. But by using my voice, I can influence certain things. And as a woman, right? We don't want all just men. And that is not the nature of Indian culture.
Yeah.
Women have always played a role in all of this stuff. And so I'm very, very happy. So, I just want to wrap up by saying I attended the Kumbh Mela, and just 2 days ago, I attended the Attukal Pongala in Trivandrum, where close to 5 million women came. We don't know their caste. They are people from all over. They all sit together and do the same ritual. And there are also other faiths there. Churches opened their doors. Mosques opened their doors so these women could do their fire ritual wherever. So, in practical sense, in everyday practice of life, we don't show this kind of behavior. So, for somebody like Equality Labs to come and say, no, you are this or that, we say no.
Right.
We are saying no because we are practicing Hindus. We are maybe Dalit or Bahujan or whatever it is. So, we can say, you are wrong.
Yeah.
And I think our voice has more power.
Yeah. So, Sudhaji, I want to thank you so much for coming, taking the time, and explaining the situation to us. One of the things that's very important is to not assume that Indians understand the legal challenges that are happening in the US or even in other parts of the world. And you talked about, for instance, the role of universities, how they became sort of the precursors for the actions that the state was going to take. And we see this happening in now universities across the board. Recently, a university in Australia has been talking about caste regulations, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things that Indians need to realize is that we have been very secure in our caste legislation, seemingly secure in our caste legislation, thinking we're dealing with very domestic issues. But now this has become an international issue of the kind of stature that even India is not in a position to tackle, because it is not even given in the hands of India to tackle. So just as how this works on the ground, an example of that. So the UNCERD had wanted to include caste as one of its categories, and India opposed it. One of the conditions that the UNCERD placed on India to not include caste was that India would give an annual report, submit annual reports to the UNCERD, listing its actions that it's taking to safeguard against caste. But it's an open playing field. So organizations like Human Rights Watch in 2007, for instance, actually submitted what was called a shadow report. And the shadow report criticized the Indian government, saying that they are not done enough. So they, like equality labs, they will give anecdotal evidence, they will give questionable statistics, they will use whatever kind of data that suits their narrative in order to make the case against India, right? And the result is that the UN actually, castigates India at that point, right? So the Indian government, which was so secure in itself, thinking that it is legislating on caste, is now quite likely under higher international
Scrutiny.
higher international authorities when defining and talking about caste. And the danger of organizations like Equality Labs claiming to be experts on caste is that the Indian government may have to answer questions drafted by Equality Labs or policies drafted by Equality Labs to be thought about, scrutinized, implemented in the Indian context, because, hey, we're the home of caste discrimination, right? So the Indian government needs to begin a process of very serious scrutiny and actual support to knowledge about caste if we have any hope to survive this international onslaught. And I hope that this conversation with you will begin that process.
I hope so. I hope people start to think.
Thank you so much.
And thank you very much.